The first photoreporters were assigned to take pictures which served as models for the drawings and engravings that will illustrate an event. Photojournalism was born when an image or a photo piece would suffice to tell a story. Picture plus caption equals news. Photoreporters were both adventurers and witnesses to everyday events, globetrotters searching for just the right image to help people understand and, if need be, to expose facts. Jules Itier, present at the signing of the 1,000-year treaty between France and China, unknowingly became the first photoreporter. Roger Fenton, sent by Queen Victoria to Balaclava, photographed the Crimean War but carefully masked the death and horror there. Photographers were present when the West was won, offering tremendous material on these unexplored territories. These photographers, scenic pioneers, provided a mythical viewpoint and were mainly concerned about the aesthetics of their pictures. The plates they used were large and their equipment was bulky and heavy. When the first transcontinental railroad was built, the courageous photographers were part of the survey expeditions, revealing a world of adventure to the general public.
The people who were producing the early work were conscious that they were producing important artwork. It was very carefully produced. They were using techniques which were well known to artists at the time in terms of composition and work like that. They were very attentive to composition. They were very attentive to what they put into the image.
Exploring the South Pole meant danger. Scott's entire crew died on their return journey. The photographs were found with the frozen bodies the following autumn. On the Shackleton expedition, the ship Endurance was trapped for 10 months on an ice pack and was eventually crushed by the pressure during the spring thaw. The photographer had no qualms about jumping into the icy waters to save some of his glass plates. Eugène Atget meticulously took inventory of everything he found interesting in a cold, still, almost abstract world. In 1897, he began a series of photographs on the street vendors and the art of old Paris. His work gained recognition in the U.S. while he was alive, thanks to the American photographer Bernice Abbott, assistant to Man Ray, who was a neighbor in Rue Campagne Première. But Atget still died in poverty. Alfred Stieglitz had a love affair with New York, never tiring of photographing the city. He advocated the familiar day-to-day scenes. Determined to defend a new art of photography, he formed a society called Photo Secession, whose quarterly publication, Camera Work, was first published in 1903. He wanted to define photography with its own criteria as opposed to painting. Stieglitz would later say about this shot taken on an immigrant ship, "If all my work were lost and this photograph was all that remained, that would be fine." Jacob Riis was the first to delve into the wretched poverty of city life. His book, How the Other Half Lives, described New York's neighborhoods, and he also received the backing of then Police Commissioner Theodore Roosevelt for well-needed social reforms. Like Riis, Hein, a sociologist, was also indifferent to photography as an art form. He used his camera to produce evidence and expose many social injustices, namely child labor. He also shot those who were building America, the men at work, later explaining, "I also wanted to do two things, show what needed to be corrected and show what needed to be admired." In the same spirit, Dorothea Lange devoted her career to social reporting. Deeply marked by the 1929 economic slump, she wanted to publicize the plight of the Great Depression's victims. In 1935, she began working for the Farm Security Administration, created by Roosevelt under the New Deal. Her project was to objectively record the living and working conditions in rural America. Her photographs were intended to arouse public opinion to support the government's action. The subject in her modern style of reporting touched the heart and spurred people into action. The depression which followed the collapse of the Wall Street stock market eventually led to worldwide economic decline. Nonetheless, photoreporting was booming, thanks to newspapers and magazines which offered images of an endangered world. Photo agencies were founded to supply the media. These agencies circulated the pictures and managed the photographers.
Keystone was one of the first international press agencies. A Hungarian came up with the idea for the agency and photo services from the United States after World War I. He had two brothers, and they split up the world photo production market.
The Garay brothers founded Keystone Paris and modeled it after their agencies in New York, London, and Berlin. The photoreporters did not sign their work. Every shot was stamped Keystone. The modern illustrated magazine was born in Germany. Pictures alone could tell a story, and the photographers were no longer anonymous. Eric Solomon, pioneer of the candid political picture, caught celebrities and heads of state in unguarded moments. Aristide Briand nicknamed him Dr. Mephistopheles because of his two tufts of graying hair. Fellow photographer Eisenstadt is considered the father of photojournalism.
Eisenstadt really invented, along with his colleague Salomon, what's called in American candid photography. In other words, the photography of people in everyday life settings. He really brought that technique very much to the fore, and of course was extremely well known for certain images such as the American sailor kissing the girl on VJ Day in Times Square. But these are classic images of candid photography, a photography which says we will treat every subject, whether it be a prime minister or whether it be a hobo, a drunk or a tramp in the street, with the same approach.
There's a love story between Paris and photographers.
Hungarian André Kertész, forerunner of the 35mm format, took pictures with humanity and tenderness.
In Paris, everything is true. Everything is human, and everything fits. There's no acting. Everything is natural. I was born to take pictures. I didn't want to imitate engravings or paintings, because I felt that the essence of photography is totally different, like another art form.
Every photographer in the world wants to come to Paris on a trip and then take pictures of life here, or of some corner or other in this city. Such incredible wealth. And thanks to the people who fell in love with Paris, this is probably the only capital in the world that has 150 years of photographic history.
I arrived in 1928. Then, maybe 4 or 5 years afterwards, somebody lent me a camera, and I started taking pictures at night. The nightlife fascinated me, and I wanted to capture things then. And later I published my first book called Paris at Night. This secret world of Paris attracted me enormously at that time. I photographed all walks of life, but it was very hard because you had to be accepted first.
Paris accepted Brassai, who moved in surrealist circles and lived the bohemian life with Henry Miller. He said that Brassai was a living eye. Henri Cartier-Bresson, who began his career snapping spontaneous shots for Vue and Harper's Bazaar, believed that everything had photographic value. His technique was like the dance of a bee, who, stirred by fragrances, buzzed around the nectar.
I think photography means putting the eye, the head, and the heart in the same line of sight. Time is essential for me. You see a particular thing at a particular moment. When you want something, that thing will happen. You get it one way or another. You have to think all the time, except when you're taking pictures. It's about intuition. Honestly, you're overcome with joy over a particular subject, visual joy.
Cartier-Bresson frees the visual subtleties in a scene and concentrates on the sidelines of an event, whether it's the first paid vacation or the coronation of George VI of England.
What you get is the rise of what's often called humanism. In other words, a concern, a fascination with the everyday life of ordinary people, both in the same society and in other parts of the world. And that explains part of the fascination with 35mm photography, I think. It's the ability to photograph very rapidly and without any complication at all.
Cartier-Bresson pulls swing-wing, perfect images out of his Leica, decisive instance that he tries to explain, but in fact he can't, and he knows it. It's talent and possibly even genius. In 1947, he created a cooperative of photographers called Magnum with Kappa, Seymour, and Roger. For them, photoreporting was a religion. Kappa emphasized his militancy and posed as a journalist in shots as intense and masculine as he was.
I met Kappa in North Africa and in Italy during World War II. And we discussed, and he gave to me his idea of finally forming an agency where we would be our own bosses, because we were all fed up with being told what to do by editorial directors. In '47, when finally the Magnum Photos was formed in New York, and then I was one of the 5 founder members, because Kappa knew of my work in Africa and the Middle East. And we, at the very beginning, divided the world between the 4 of us photographically, because Bill van der Voort had dropped out. And I had Africa and the Middle East, and Henri had the Far East and India. Shim had Europe, and I think Kappa was ambassador at large or something like that.
In 1954, Cartier-Bresson was the first Western photographer to be allowed into the Soviet Union. Each image was a revelation, as a once closed world finally opened up. He attended Gandhi's funeral and called himself a Buddhist angry with the state of the world.
Photography is like drawing, my way of keeping a diary. Basically, if there weren't a need to communicate, to show people what you like or don't like, testify about our era, I'd have just as much fun if there weren't any film in the camera. The exciting part for me is when I'm right in front of a subject. Click. That's overpowering. Click. And I press just at the right moment. It happens in a fraction of a second, and that's the only creative moment there is.
For the first time, photographers who were photojournalists saw that somebody could produce extraordinary images of extraordinary artistic quality. This influence has gone on until the present day. I mean, I think he is still by far the most influential photographer of the 20th century.
In the optimistic post-war years, some publications were revived and others were born. This was the heyday of photoreporting. There was a growing need to circulate information, and photographs meant truth, impact, and modernness. From then on, every event had its pictures. In 1959, when the Cuban Revolution broke out, Daniel Camus, international reporter at Paris Match magazine, was honeymooning in the Caribbean.
We were in Cuba covering the event. Nobody could get in because the airport was closed. We were the only reporters over there. We were able to meet Castro, who arrived in Cuba with his bearded group, his whole team. He welcomed us warmly and even gave us a revolution as a wedding present.
When you're photographing something, you have to be in tune with the subject and like what you do, or else you'll never take great pictures. If you think about how much money you'll make from the picture you're taking, you may take a good one, but it will not have been your heart guiding your head.
Alberto Corda worked in fashion before turning to photojournalism. He first became interested in the living conditions of Cuba's underprivileged neighborhoods and then struck up a friendship with the revolutionaries and became their favorite photographer.
Antoine de Saint-Exupéry wrote a marvelous book called The Little Prince. In it, there's a sentence that goes something like, "You can only see properly with your heart. The essentials are invisible to the eyes." That's what happened to me with Che Guevara. I was taking pictures. Fidel Castro was giving a speech in the street, and in a sweeping movement photographers typically make, Che Guevara came into my viewfinder. I pushed the release button and click, it went off. Without my brain telling me what to do, it was an eye, mind, and heart sequence. I got 2 pictures of Che Guevara because he appeared out of the blue, took a look at the crowd, got emotional, and left. That's how I got the most famous image in the history of photography in 1/250th of a second.
When the Wall of Shame was built, television cameras were there, but photographs continued to write history. The major news event in 1964 was the Pope's visit to the Holy Land. Paris Match chartered a Caravelle jet and sent 60 reporters to cover the story. The plane was turned into a news office and they radioed information back to the magazine headquarters at Orly Airport. The magazine photographers were present at every stage of the historical journey and were able to capture the slightest gesture, immortalize the slightest holy moment, and they shut out the other magazine crews who learned a hard lesson: event, mobilization, and speed. In May 1968, the riots were widely followed on the radio. Magazines and newspapers were also there to tell the story with the help of photographers and amateurs. In the 60s, time seemed to speed up. Television took off and became the leading news source. It had such an impact because it could broadcast an event live, and viewers felt they were actually living it. It was time for the photo reporter profession to evolve. They could better observe the world's major issues that now spilled over into screening rooms, books, and exhibitions.
It was a good thing that television came along, but that photography stayed where it was, not getting too important, staying simple, but yet very powerful and very personal. Sometimes it was like a weapon, but also a testimony, something very oblivious, subjective, mental, I guess you'd say.
You can write history with photography. When you have photographers who don't sell their work right away, it doesn't matter. They'll sell them later. The pictures always end up appearing somewhere because a page in history is written every hour of the day, somewhere in the world.
Photographs, like symbols, chronicle history, and aesthetics are often as important as the news piece. While moving TV images go by too fast, photographs, like words, stay imprinted in people's minds.
Sometimes I see CNN, in places I work. These people stay on the surface, and it's like very quick sort of news. So I think there's going to be always in the future a place for us, where we can really penetrate the culture and deliver something different than a quick soundbite, which you get on the TV.
Brazilian Sebastião Salgado was an economist until the day he realized that the pictures he brought back from his missions in Africa better illustrated the situation than his written research. This passionate humanist wanted to invest in the long term. Author of a 6-year-long saga about human beings at work, The Hand of Humankind, men and women will always be at the heart of his research. In his opinion, his pictorial coverage must be totally sincere and almost reverent.
I discovered photography very late, and when I did, I thought it was a fabulous way of connecting with people, getting close to them, to see problems from the inside. I thought I could offer insight and provoke a much wider debate through the images rather than economics.
For the year 2000, Salgado is researching migratory movements and displaced populations, whether due to armed conflicts or social problems. He believes such movements of populations are leading to a universal race.
This is the map of the farm, where the peasants are supposed to live. The 205,000 acres are not being used. The movement of landless people perfectly illustrates how people are displaced from rural areas to the cities. Most people that are already here in this camp aren't really from this region. They've been moved from a lot of places. They came here looking for land because they don't want to go to the cities. This issue is an integral part of my research because today we are witnessing huge masses of people moving from the countryside to the cities. When you take a picture, there's the desire to do it, but you take along your past, your ideology, and your history. My pictures don't take shape the minute I press the button. They've been with me ever since I was little. The lighting I'm interested in is what I've seen all my life. Maybe it's the huge backlighting because I come from a country where there's light everywhere. We were always in the shadows. I know how to look from the shadows into the light.
All year long, magazines commission Sebastião Salgado to publish stories with 40 to 60 pictures in each piece.
You live in France, you're in Paris, but there are actually few people that really live like this. I think 4/5 of the planet lives in an entirely different way. Life is very hard, rough, the environment is not easy, there's overpopulation and people have to fight to survive. This is where I came from and this is my country. To do this kind of story, you have to strongly identify with the subjects you're taking. You really have to be in total agreement ideologically with what's happening, and then there's a very, very intense involvement with the photographer. I think what happened in Africa, in Rwanda, when a tremendous number of photographers came, lots of cameramen, at one point people started criticizing the photographers because they took the pictures. But I heard very few people criticizing the government and the people who committed the massacres. The photographers were not responsible. They were there to witness, to record. They brought back testimonies through their images. They initiated debate and controversy. People learned about this conflict because photographers brought pictures back from over there.
To all photo reporters, you nomads, intense and free, you enrich our lives not with things the way they could or should be, but the way they are. You give us your worldly intelligence, your distress, your despair, as well as your sense of humor, your battles, and your light.